Hey folks, welcome back to Only Best Fancy Novels. My name is Rabin, and today we're talking about the Books of the South, the second omnibus of Black Company novels containing the fourth, fifth, and sixth novels in the series. I think in publication order at least. But and personally, this is the omnibus where the story begins to get really wild. So strap in, we got a lot to talk about. The first novel in the omnibus is Shadow Games, and this is one of the more fun ones in the series. That being said, I do have some nitpicks about it, but we'll get into it. What is Shadow Games about? Following the events at the end of the White Rose, the Black Company has been reduced to a shadow of its former self. There's a new captain at the helm, and he decides that the time has come for the remnants of the Black Company to fulfill an ancient oath made by them as one of the free companies of Katavar. So, in order to fulfill this oath, they head south. But the further south they go, the more it becomes clear that their coming has been anticipated, and not in a good way. It turns out that this quest that they're on may lead them down a road of carnage the likes of which this land hasn't seen in centuries. So pretty intense stuff. And this book in general is great. Like we're stripped down to a very core cast of characters. We have some new faces, but it's largely old faces that get shuffled around into new positions, which is pretty exciting. But like I said, this book has both stuff I love and both I hate. A lot of stuff that I love and a lot of stuff that I disliked about it. So what I liked most about it is that the Black Company has a very storied history, and that's something we see on their journey across the South. Like, it's one thing to say these guys have this long tradition. It's another thing to see them travel back through a land, through lands where they've traveled previously, and to begin to see some of the impact that they've had, mainly in the reactions of the population, which range everything from downright horror to excitement. Like, it spans the gamut, and it's amusing to watch. Especially when you consider the fact that these guys, it would have been years and decades since they passed through, and yet somehow they have this impact that on the local populace. It just goes to highlight what an intriguing band of bastards these guys are, to put it that way. So that's one thing I really loved about this book, seeing like this manifestation of their history. The thing that really grated on me about this book is, of course, before I get into that, actually, like, this novel is everything we like about the Black Company. They're traveling. They get absolutely embroiled in so many different things, like a lot of backstabbing and cutthroat politics, and quite a few battles and set pieces. They which kind of segues me into the thing that I didn't like about this book, in that this is the fourth book in the series now, and the villains in it almost has what I can only really think of as like a Scooby-Doo aspect to it. Like, we'll get this new threat, the company will go and face them, the threat will turn out to be a wash, highly incompetent, or the company beats them far too easily for it to make sense. And then we'll get this reveal regarding the villain, and it's just the same thing over and over again, which doesn't even make sense, because these particular villains that keep cropping up over and over, like, we've seen quite a bit of their history as well, in previous iterations. So they, like, the level of knowledge and the capacity that they exhibit in these new iterations when they go up against the company, it doesn't equate to what we've known of them. Like, thinking back to the first, the second, the third book, it just doesn't add up. It's something that doesn't quite make sense. But anyway, I think that's my biggest nitpick with the book. That being said, like, these books are still very fun to read. Like, these guys, they really stomp, is one way of putting it. We get, like, just the grungy gallows humor that's just the core of this series. All that fun stuff. This book continues to be told largely through Crocus' POV as the analyst of the company. And given how much he tends to ponder on the morality of his actions in these annals that he's writing, sometimes it's easy to forget that these aren't the good guys, and then we'll get Glen Cook's depiction of a particular scene that they're embroiled in, and we realize these guys really are the good guys. Like, they will not shirk and doing some very evil stuff if it comes to it. But yeah, all in all, a fun book, a fun installment that definitely sets up some pretty exciting stuff, especially given the way the cliffhanger that it ends with. And yeah, that's Shadow Games. The next book, the fifth book, Dreams of Steel, is actually one of my personal favorites in the series, and it's, for me, it's one of the peaks of the series. So Dreams of Steel picks up many months after the events of Shadow Games, and it happens when a different analyst picks up the pen to record the events that have happened in that time span. Even as the Black Company continues to wage war against the Shadow Masters. This is the Book of Lady. So, like I said, this is easily the most exciting entry in the series to date of the 5 books that we have. Like, this book is told almost exclusively from the POV of Lady. And the thing to remember about Lady is that she's a very ancient person. Like, she predates the Black Company itself. And she's been like this tyrannical empress and all these things. So she's very cold, she's very distant, and that comes across in the way that she narrates events. Like, it's a very different tone, it's a very different depiction of the story that we get from her, given what we've seen so far, and it works. It really works. Because the thing about Lady is that she is... Her hands are stained even by Black Company standards. She surrounds herself with some absolutely evil people. She does some incredibly dark stuff, and she doesn't pull any punches in this book where it comes to that. Like, she just states everything that she does, and it can get very horrific, it can get very terrible when you really sit down and think through the ramifications of it. It's pretty sick. It's pretty sick. Like, this book, it really feels like it escalates it really escalates things, honestly, with these books, because when you read the previous books, when you read what Croker depicts some of the actions that the Black Company did, it's mentioned as like a 1-line, 2-line in passing kind of thing. Some things are hinted at. Not this one. This one, Lady will explicitly tell you some of the things that happened in gory detail. So there's that. And then there's the actual events that she gets embroiled in. And Lady is just at this absolute web of conspiracy. Like, she has a conflict going against the Shadow Masters. She has the internal strife within Taglios that she has to deal with. She has the mystery of the whole cult of Kina and her position in it, and the potential ramifications. And there's no love lost on any side. She's surrounded by enemies. Even the few allies that she has, she's very hesitant to trust or to really lean on. And that's not even touching some of the other sub-threads that go on in this book, because it's really crazy to just stop and think of how many balls Glen was juggling with this story, how many things get done in such a standard page count for him. Like, this book is 220 pages, no different from any other. Like, he does it really brilliantly. He does it really brilliantly. Like, I was just completely hooked, start to finish. And like I said, this is a reread for me. I knew like this was one of my favorites going in, and I was still really hooked on how it plays out. And the other thing about these threads is that they come together in a really crazy way, a really meandering way that it just absolutely explodes. Like, this book ends in one of the most insane cliffhangers. Like, the series has multiple cliffhangers, but this book ends in one of the largest cliffhangers of the series. It's just really, really well done. Like, it has everything we like about the Black Company: the politicking and the backstabbing and the mystery and the all of that. In addition to that, like, because of Lady's very explicit depiction of certain things, the horror element of this book is also really wrapped up. It's similar to Shadow's Linger, in that in the same way that Shadow's Linger had this grungy, dark feel to it, this miasmic kind of darkness that just pervaded the entire novel. This one has that same kind of horrific twist throughout it. This horrific aura, you can say, throughout it, interjected with just some absolutely horrible moments with some of the acts that are perpetuated by Lady or on her orders. Like, it's really It's really crazy. And then we have the cult of Kina, and we as we learn more of them, like they become quite a bit more horrific. It's very clear that whatever lady is involved in with this, it's just not going to end well. It's really not going to end well. And like I said, even though I already talked about it, the ending is an absolute banger. Like, definitely this book is my favorite of the 5 so far. And given what I remember of the other books moving forward, I think this might very well just be my peak of the series. Anyway, so that's Dreams of Steel. Then we come to the final book in the omnibus, and this one kind of ends things with a whimper for me, because this book is The Silver Spike. And after the insane cliffhanger that we end on in Dreams of Steel, this book gives us a complete POV shift, a complete we jump back in time and we have a POV shift. We go back to the events at the end of The White Rose and what happens after. And we follow a different cast of characters, like the folks who did not continue on with the company, who went their own way, and what happens with them after. And this book is the book that ties off the plot threads that were left hanging at the end of White Rose. So really and truly, even though this is the 6th book in the series, it should absolutely be read after The White Rose, because like this book doesn't intersect with the 4th and 5th books in any way, and it'll really jar you. It'll really jar you to read Dreams of Steel and then switch to this, and it'll be a very frustrating experience. So I highly recommend when you're reading these books, read the first omnibus, and then when you get to the second omnibus, start with this book, The Silver Spike, and then go back and read the 4th and 5th. But anyway, rant over. So like I said, this book picks up at the end of the it essentially tells us what happens in the Barrowlands after the events of The White Rose, and we follow a different cast of characters. We follow a whole new group of people, and we follow the characters that were left behind by the Black Company, who decided to part ways and that kind of thing, and their story and how that plays out. And there weren't, like, if at this point if you're watching this review, at least you would have read The White Rose, so you know what were some of the threads that were left hanging. So you know, like, there was things that needed to be addressed, and that's what's addressed in this book. This book by itself is pretty wild. Like, following the new cast of characters, it's just insane. The depths that greed will drive some people to, and that's something that we see in this book in spades, because of course nothing good ever happens with these guys. And we also get to see how the story of the people who are left behind, how that plays out, and it plays out in a really interesting way, a really fun way for me. Like, I kind of like the ending that some of them got. The others, it was kind of a bit of a disappointment given what we saw of them in the first 3 books, but it is what it is. Anyway, regarding the events of this book itself, it does the whole Scooby-Doo thing as well that I was referring to in the referring to about in Shadow Games, but at least it does it in a way that makes sense. Like, the threats that arise are absolutely unleashed by the greed of regular people who should have known, who were completely blinded and should have known better. And what we get is just this absolute rat's nest maze as a result of that, as all these vested interests come together to try and get their hands on the Silver Spike. Like, this book is just one big rat race to get the Silver Spike, and the events surrounding it, and just the absolute horror that is unleashed as a result of that. The book does do things in a very interesting way, in that you have this nexus that happens with all these characters, and it's a lot of intrigue and a lot of tension and suspense as they basically circle one another, each trying to one up the other. Some trying to, and everyone has their own agenda. Some people are trying to locate the Silver Spike. Some people who have it want to get rid of it, and everyone just has their own agenda essentially. And over the course of the novel, you can see the way that this tension and this suspense, it just degrades everybody that it comes into contact with. And in the book, like, the influence of the Spike is not to be belittled as well, but you just see the way that these events just absolutely degrade everyone that become embroiled in it. The highs that they start on and the lows that they fall on. This book in particular, I should mention, has a character that I can easily see people hating, absolutely despising, because he has some pretty disgusting predilections, which are just slapped you. They just slap you in the face. It's something that crops up at the start of the book and very much later on, and there's no sugarcoating it. There's no way of making it look of making it any better than it is. And worst of all, this guy gets a very rare ending for anyone in this series. So yeah, I can completely understand if people say they dislike this book. Honestly, at the end of it, I was starting to think I really dislike this one as well. At the same time, I did appreciate what it does, because it gives us a solid ending to the threads left at the end of the White Rose. And as a book itself, like it was really well executed, because we have just these impending threads that circle as these different vested interests converge to go on the spike. Then we just have the constant tension and intrigue and suspense throughout the entire novel, as everyone is in this kill box essentially, and it's all related to the spike. Really, but as a standalone book, it really works well. But it's not a standalone book. It also gives us so much closure and these kind of things. So all in all, it really works well. And like I said, it has one of the most disgusting characters in the 6 books to date. And that's saying a lot, but it works. It works. Like the fact that character can be so disgusting and so despised just goes to show how well Glen executes what he does. Yeah. Oh, and this book also gives us, it wraps up quite some interesting mysteries, you can say. Some threads that have been dangling from the first 3 books, not just the White Rose, but the previous 2 books as well. It also deals with all of that. So it gives us a good ending to how it's a good closing of the chapter for the Black Company as we've seen them to date as of the first 3 books. Everything after they go south is a whole lot of ball game. It's a whole thing. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on the Silver Spike and on the books of the South as a whole. Like I said, this book is kind of hard to judge, because it both has one of my favorites of, if not my favorite of the entire Black Company series in it, but it also has one of the most annoying books, mainly because of the placement. Like, I think if I reread the Silver Spike, I think the first time around I did read it after the White Rose. If I read it after the White Rose again, I probably wouldn't have finished off this omnibus with so much frustration as I did. But yeah, not a great reread, I should say, of one of my all-time favorite series, and I absolutely look forward to keep it rolling into the 3rd omnibus, The Many Deaths of the Black Company. And yeah, if you made it this far into the video, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.